My name is Marius Rackwitz. I'm working on the core team of okay. There you go. On the core team of CocoaPods, and I'm here today to summarize our last year, what challenges we had, because we just had WWDC, Apple's annual developer conference, and historically we have there our own State of the Union, where we give the current state of and present the current state of CocoaPods. Yeah, and I'm part of the core team, as said. And beside that, my day-to-day job, something is out of sync here, sorry for that. Beside that, my day-to-day job is working at Realm. Realm is a mobile database for Android and iOS. Feel free to check that out later on, not yet, no. But back to CocoaPods. What is CocoaPods? And perhaps a short question to the audience. Who of you are iOS developers here? Raise hands? Oh, nice, okay. Who of you know what CocoaPods is? Okay, this is a good, fair percentage. So probably I don't have to explain it, but I wasn't about to do it myself.
Hey, Dad.
Why, hi, son. Something bothering you? Your get up and go seems to have got up and left.
Well, Eddie Clark was making fun of me today because he's got CocoaPods in his Xcode project and I don't have any. What am I gonna do?
Son, I think it's time we had a talk. You're getting older now, and I'm guessing you've started noticing the allure of certain third-party libraries?
AF networking has been kind of nice to me lately, and gosh, I guess I do sort of like Google Analytics, but I think I'd be too scared to talk to them.
Son, I won't lie. Integrating with a third-party library, it isn't always easy. You have to download frameworks and bundles and import them into your Xcode project. You probably need to link to your binary and add a new iOS linker flag or two. And, well, heck, if this library depends on any other frameworks, well, you're going to have to do it all over again with those libraries. It wasn't that funny. Anyway, keeping these things up to date isn't easy either. You have to go out onto the internet, see if anything has changed, and repeat the whole process all over again.
Gosh, Dad, that just sounds like a bunch of work.
Well, there are a lot of steps. And if you're not careful, you're going to end up making some pretty confusing little mistakes. Like this one. Oh, instance 7FE5B1. I'm sorry I let you down.
Gee, Dad, this just sounds too scary. Forget I even asked.
Well, not so fast, son. You see, this is where CocoaPods comes in. CocoaPods is a dependency manager written specifically for adding third-party libraries to your iOS application.
Really? Well, how does that work?
Well, come with me. I'll show you. So now you see, Robbie. Oh, good thing I have this on me. The author of a library is going to write a pod spec file that specifies everything you as a developer would need to properly install it. What files are required and where they live, what iOS libraries you might need to run it, if there are any pre or post-processing stops, and much more. Now, you as a developer don't actually need to care about most of this, although I do think it's interesting. You just need to know the name of this pod spec file, and optionally if there is a specific version you want to be using. See, you're going to create your own file, called a pod file, that lists the names of the pod specs that represent the libraries you want to use with your application. Then CocoaPods takes care of the rest.
Okay, so this was a little video, and this was only the first 2 minutes, and it goes 8 minutes longer. Google produced that. And we will come back later to that, why Google produced this video. But yeah, they produced it in a 1950s sitcom way, like I've seen. Feel free to check that out later. So a quick recapture. What is CocoaPods? It's an application level dependency manager. And beside that, we also feel like a community around still mostly open Objective-C code, because that's still most of the percentage of libraries which were open source. Swift is still real fresh, but we also support Swift as well. Yeah, and how does it work? The next steps, which would be also featured in a video, is build CocoaPods on top of an existing dependency manager, which is Bundler for Ruby. And so it's distributed as a Ruby gem. And as seen in the video, the little things you need to integrate your project into another user project are pod specs you have to create and you can publish. And you can consume them over declaring that you depend on specific dependencies in your pod file. And then we handle all the rest, like all the things which are obviously a bit complex. If you have to go through a list of dependencies for each project you integrate yourself and take care that you integrate the right versions so it doesn't crash, that's all handled by CocoaPods. And in real life, this can become a lot. Like here we have Artsy's pod files. Artsy is sponsoring the development of CocoaPods also quite a lot, and so it's not so surprising that they make use a lot of CocoaPods, and so they have open sourced a lot of their internal dependencies and also their projects, which is nice to check out if you want to see how a project which makes a lot of use of CocoaPods to integrate dependencies, or just for other techniques as well. Yeah. Beside that, it's also good to know about CocoaPods that is based on a plugin architecture that allows us, from a design point of view, to have very small components which have only one specific usage and help us in our development because we don't have one big monolithic main project. And it allows others to have specific behavior they only need for specific use case. And it allows us as well to test experimental behavior, which shouldn't be available direct for everyone, and which could perhaps cause crashes or stuff like that, which are undesirable for everyone. So in that way, we can try out new things, which is quite nice. So back to this video, what the hell has Google to do with that? They, as a recapture, they officially announced on Google I/O that they will, from now on, distribute the SDKs over CocoaPods, which was quite big news. We never got mentioned from Apple in WWDC, but we got mentioned now from Google from Google at the I/O, which is for us first felt like quite a big acknowledgement. But beside that, we got some love from Apple as well. And if you think about it, it's probably easy to understand why that happened. Why Google has gone into CocoaPods or has announced that as their way, and why Apple didn't care yet about it, beside ResearchKit. Apple can just distribute their SDKs and their framework with the SDK, and Google needs to find another way to get their libraries and frameworks distributed to their users. So it's probably not too surprising. Yeah, that was the pull request which caused that ResearchKit got support for CocoaPods, which was for us a huge thing because Apple is gone into open source and has open sourced another project, which didn't happen back then. When it happened, there wasn't too much other things in the last years. Now we have heard on the Apple's annual developer conference that they will publish Swift as well, which is big news. Yeah, but enough from Apple and Google now. Beside those, our Fortune 50 companies users, there's, for example, Yahoo, which also contributed to CocoaPods in a way. They built for their specific use case plugin to allow to blacklist specific dependencies because they have quite a lot of them and have to ensure on CI that only those they really want to use are allowed, and they can deprecate and prevent usage of some of their own pods they have. Yeah. Okay. More about CocoaPods. Who are those who make CocoaPods? Only a quick overview of the team. That is the core team we have. We are building that, and it was at least one more who is to mention here. It is also important to mention in what has happened in the last year, because Eloy, who was the initiator of the project and came up with it, stepped down, and he still stays around the project as a consultant and helps us in case of doubt, but he is not too much involved in the daily work because he has set priorities now on his private life, which had some new events like his new houseboat and a true child beside the child he had cared before all the time, CocoaPods. So, and how we develop at CocoaPods. One of those I had here before was Sam, and Sam had the luck to work on CocoaPods in a sponsorship which was has happened in Stripe's open source retreat, which allowed him to rework our resolver we had to have a proper dependency resolver, and since then he was able to give this piece of technology and component he developed there as a separate gem again, because we have this, we are built on a dependency manager and we can use and are scattered over a lot of gems. So he was able to contribute that back to Bundler, the dependency manager we run in, and Ruby gems, the package manager. Yeah, beside the sponsorship, we have other project involvements. We have now, since this year, 2 Rails girls in a Summer of Code, which is nice, and they want to help us, and we want to help them. As CocoaPods is built mostly in Ruby, and as said, in Ruby gems. And we also have some websites which are powered by Rails, so it totally makes sense to be part of this project, and we are quite happy about having support of them. So, what is the current state of CocoaPods, and what is the way for the future we have ahead of us? Last year at this time, we were short before releasing our 1.0. 1.0 is like really a big thing. We look forward since at least 2 years to be able to release that. But then came Apple, and Apple released Swift, and Apple changed their tooling. So we had now to support frameworks, which took us quite some time. But now it's there. If you didn't try it out yet, there's this little directive you can use in your pod file. It's use_frameworks, exclamation mark. and this will change the entire integration in your project, or what used to be static libraries, how they are integrated, are then frameworks. And by frameworks, you can also integrate Swift into your project, Swift from third-party dependencies, which is nice, especially if you have a Swift project. Before that, it was possible with static libraries to, if your project is in Swift and you use Objective-C libraries, then this works with static libraries. But if you want to use Swift code from others, you have to go over frameworks. Why is that? Because Apple doesn't ship the Swift standard libs so far with the OS, and you have to link against the standard libs, and this is a different process of linking with static libraries. And yeah, this was a big step, and this happened around January for us. Since then, and this is quite new, you will have heard here for the first time of it, because that has happened tonight. We have shipped another beta. A beta is still something unusual for us, that we go the way over pre-release instead of releasing it directly to everyone. We do that whenever something really big changes in the project. And this contains the deduplication of pod targets, which is very important if you have an app which uses extensions, or in future also watch apps, because if you use the same dependencies across your extensions and your app or your watch app, then you run into some issues with publishing to the App Store and submitting your app to the App Store if you have the integration like we had it before, that every framework was duplicated and was built for each target on your side where it needs to be integrated separately. And with the deduplication, we ensure that a framework is only built one time and can, at least as long as you are in specific constraints, if you can use the same framework for iOS and OS X, because you link against a different base SDK, and this wouldn't work. So then you still need to, and this CocoaPods will figure out that completely automatically for you, that the libraries are then duplicated, or the frameworks. So yeah, this is a big step for us, and there are a lot of other bug fixes contained in this version. So yeah, go and check that out. You will probably read more about that, and you will see that on Twitter if you follow the CocoaPods account. So with that, we have only a few things left on our path to 1.0. One big thing we want to do until then, so the first point here on the list is remove duplicate code paths. Yeah, we can get rid of a bit of debt we collected until we are able to reach that point. But beside that, we want to clean up the pod file syntax and want to launch a new DSL, which makes it easier and even more straightforward to use CocoaPods and to declare your dependencies, because over the time it got more and more complex, and the scenarios and even the toolchain developed further, as we have seen. So we want to go a new approach and rethink how this is mirrored to the pod file to make it easier and easier to understand. Yeah, another big project which has just happened is statistics. A lot of users have asked for that for a while, and let's check out how other dependency managers present their projects on their websites. That's how CocoaPods looks on the RubyGems website. And as we see here, we have some statistics in this page, like total downloads and downloads for this version, and something like that wasn't yet available to CocoaPods. Same for NPM. If you know Node.js, then you're probably aware of that. And yeah, after relaunching our website and how the pods look on our website, they have now a very nice and dedicated page with lots of new elements. We have now also statistics as a further step. Only for public pods. If you have private repos, they are not available over the website. It's probably also not that relevant for you, because if you have your private repo, you're probably, I mean, as we have seen, there are big companies like Yahoo, which makes use of private repos and have like hundreds of pod specs in there. But mostly you will be able to have an overview how often your library is used. So how does it look like? You have overview about the downloads your pod gets, which is, I think, very interesting for you to know how often and how popular your library is. And beside that, you see an overview where your library is used, if it's used specific in apps, in test bundles, in extensions, or in watch apps. Yeah, and for now, this is in beta files, so we don't bundle that with CocoaPods. And if you want to try it out, you can do that by a plugin, as seen here. You can declare that in your pod file as well. This is to ensure that the plugin is installed. You have to go the installation process yourself. But yeah, so statistics are available, and if you want to try it out, you can for now, but you can also, we will roll it out for everyone in the near future. And if you don't like that, you can still opt out of it. It's optional, and we took care a lot about privacy of our users. So one thing, as you see here, statistics are powered by Segment. We partner with them because we are, to gather all the statistics, we need to ping back from CocoaPods whenever libraries are installed. And so we need to be highly available for that. And as we had some challenges before and have seen how hard it is to be 100% available all the time, and sometimes it's not in your hands, we wanted to ensure that it has a high availability and that we don't have to care about all that ourselves. So they collect the data, and we are able, by in an anonymous way, we use an ID in your project file, which is only generated once and doesn't contain too much sensitive data. But we hash that again to ensure that we can't go back in any way to any user-specific data and store that together with the pods you installed. Each installation, without that, you're able to see, okay, this one who used that pod would also use this other pod. We don't want to go into that way, like after you install, run pod install over your pod file, you should also try out this one. This is nothing we want to do. Yeah, and we are a community project, and this means that sometimes it's also a lot about educating, especially in the iOS world, where we get sometimes not too much information how new things works. When Apple, for example, released Swift, we have to educate ourselves and then educate everyone else how those things work. But this, to be a community project means also that we are very open for help and that we need help of ours. And what can you do to do that? File issues, and whenever you have a problem, communicate about that. But first of all, search if someone different had the problem before. Then we have some contribution guidelines, which makes it easier to file an issue in a way which is helpful and which doesn't cause that we waste our time and we don't have anybody in this process has frustration. Try to include everything what is helpful. We are aware that you don't want to share probably in any situation your whole pod file or your whole pod file log, whatever it is. But whatever you can include, it is really helpful for us to be able to reproduce things. And if you are able to cut it down to a reproduced case yourself, we really love to see something like that. If you include a link to a Git or a GitHub repo, where you set up a little repo and it's just one pod spec or one dependency which is failing, that's super helpful for us because we can go into that and try that out and see where the problem is and see in the CocoaPods code paths what goes wrong. And it's also super helpful for you because investigating your issue will often lead to discovering something new, either how CocoaPods works or how the toolchain works. So I really can recommend to do that from my own experience when trying to reproduce the issues of others. And beside that, PRs in any way, not only filing issues, but PRs are also welcome. Even if it's just a little typo, if you see like an error message is misspelled when you are in a certain case. And it doesn't have to be our main project. Like the main thing, the CLI you're confronted with, there are lots of other projects around that which are beneath that, and we need contributions there as well. And it can be other things than code to contribute to CocoaPods. It could be also a guide on our website and explain how you solved a certain challenge, which is probably more common for others. Or just a blog post on your own page where you share your experiences. Okay. How we run this project. I told you some things about how to contribute, but let's say you want to start an open source project yourself. How would you run it? And one of the first two important things, which are probably very obvious, be nice and be supportive. Without that, when the tone is wrong, you won't get too popular with your project, for sure. And beside that, there are some other things you can do. For an open source project, it is obviously important to be open, but not only on a source code level. Be open on other levels as well. Share your decisions you make, why you do something in a certain way. Get your contributors involved in the sense of communicate openly with them and try to be active and be helpful how they can achieve something. Don't do everything yourself. If there's someone who wants to tackle a little thing, get them involved. You don't have to do everything in all openness. Sometimes there's some things, like we built CocoaPods stats, and we built it behind the curtain and wanted to launch that. And but we were open in our team, and to achieve that, we use collaboration tools. Beside GitHub, which is obviously one of our most important GitHub collaboration tools for us all, I would say. We use for our team communication Slack, for example, but there are a lot of other communication tools you can use instead of that. What is another point? How to make decision processes. Perhaps it's easy to be tempted to run a open source project as a grassroots democracy. This sounds perhaps nice in theory, but I would say from what I've seen in the past, it isn't really practical. Sometimes you just need for certain things an overall design guidance. And you can achieve that by having clear responsibilities. We have that in CocoaPods team. Kyle is, after Eloy stepped down, responsible for the technical parts, and Arthur is, how he states himself, our design dictator. So this is far away from grassroots democracy, obviously. Yeah, and one last but not least important thing to go back to the source code level. I think we wouldn't be able to develop that fast and take contributions of ours if we would have a monolithic architecture. Good that we have this architecture to be have our code base scattered over a lot of small components which all try to solve one specific problem. Also, what we try to achieve is to have a very decent code coverage. As I would say, it is not 100%, but from the code, test code is clear what they should, the things should do, and you can read the test and can understand things in that way, and we can catch a lot of bugs by our unit tests in our experience with that. What is also, I think, very important and helpful for us, and what I've seen in open source work in practice is have a uniform code style and try to find a way to enforce that. We use Rubocop for that, and with Rubocop, it's a tool which checks your Ruby AST and also on a text level how your code is formatted, and finds some code smells or some valuations of style rules automatically and throws out errors about that. This can be sometimes very distracting because you want to get some real code done, and it is sometimes opinionated. Code styles are always opinionated. I think you know about the discussions whether you put the curly brace on the same line like the if statement or on another line. You never would solve that problem on a theoretical argumentative base, but you are able to set something as your code style for your project, and you can have that through your complete code base. And I think this helps because we can we don't have to communicate about things like that because CI automatically propagates an error if something like that is wrong, and you see it as a contributor. Okay, the computer says it's wrong, so it's wrong. It's not a human. It is, I don't have to get critic through it, or there's no tone involved. It's just a tool which runs over it. And yeah, besides all what could be catched by tools, you should take care of your code base and should tackle code smells when you see them. And I mean, we have not been for all the time scattered over so many components, separate gems, and plugins. We have seen that on our way, and we have raise questions about what could be done different and how could we solve that better, and have then cut something out of it and put it out as a separate game. And then, yeah, others can use that too. But this is not, it's not all about components. It's also about little things sometimes, like your class model and stuff like that you can improve. And yeah, beside that, which was also, I think, I more or less mentioned that before, automate all the things. It's good, it is absolutely necessary for us that our tests and Rubocop and stuff like that runs on CI. But what is also very important for us is when CI ever is broken, which happens from time to time, and this has to be fixed soon. But also if one of the things in the process is broken, we are glad that it's not like a complete script which only runs through and can't be intercepted or broken down in tiny steps. It is implemented as a rake file. Rake is a build automation tool. It's basically make for Ruby, and you have a nice Ruby DSL in it. And we have one big task which is run on CI, rakes back, and this breaks down in much more smaller tasks. And this helps a lot. If something went wrong, you can just try to fix that problem and run this one task again. Because our CI tasks run for a long time, it takes quite a bit until it's run through. And doing it yourself, all the long thing, the whole test suite is, we have 3 different ways of testing things: unit tests, integration tests, and then build test where Xcode build is actually invoked as well. So you don't probably want to do that if Rubocop comes up with a problem with a style violation. That our automation is at this part inspectable makes it frustration-free for us, that we can just run it locally, just one tiny step, and get instant feedback about it. Yeah, and one last thing about how to run an open source project, but I think thing in general, share what you did and what you learned on your way. If you have built something good, nobody will discover it by itself. If you don't share it, you deserve some attention for it, and share it and make sure that you get that. It's, yeah, obvious. Okay, I'm already through. Thanks for your attention.